June 1994. Remember that? Some of us probably feel like it's just yesterday. It's everywhere you turned. I mean, you couldn't escape it, the white Bronco chase. Our TVs were plastered with it like some kind of movie playing out live. The O J Simpson trial.
What gets me is that even after all these years, it's more than some event in the past. It still gets people talking and debating. And it forces us to face some uncomfortable truths about America, like about fame and race and justice.
Yeah, let's dive into that. We've got a ton of stuff to look at here. A 48 hours episode, articles, even some personal notes, all digging into why this whole O J Simpson thing still has such power today.
I think to really grasp the impact, we got to start with OJ himself. Before the trial, before the headlines, he was a total icon. I mean, a legend in football, a charismatic guy who seemed to move so easily between black and white America.
He was the ultimate crossover, like those Hertz commercials, man, everyone loved those. It felt like he was the face of this like post-racial America everyone wanted. Though looking back, maybe that was more of an image, something carefully crafted.
Yeah, that's a really important point. OJ, and he admitted this himself, he avoided getting involved in racial issues. He wanted to be seen as just OJ, not a black man. There's even that interview where he said, "I'm not black, I'm OJ." He worked really hard to separate himself from anything that might put him in a racial box.
So you think that choice, that decision to downplay his race, played a part in how white America saw him, especially during the trial?
For sure, absolutely. It let him be accepted by white audiences in a way that other black athletes at the time probably couldn't have been. It fed into this idea of him as a safe black man, an acceptable one, which definitely affected public opinion during the trial.
And about perceptions. His relationship with Nicole Brown Simpson, it was always portrayed as this glamorous Hollywood fairy tale. But behind the scenes, things were way darker, right?
Sadly, yes. Abuse was a big part of their relationship. Nicole told friends and family she was afraid for her safety. She even kept diaries and photos documenting the abuse. There's this really chilling detail from one of our sources. After the murders, OJ wouldn't take a lie detector test, and his friend Ron Shipp asked him about it. OJ admitted he had dreams about killing Nicole.
Chillin', man, that gives me chills. It's a scary look into that dark side of their relationship. Makes you wonder how much the people close to OJ actually knew about the abuse.
And then there was that incident on New Year's Day in 1989. OJ pleaded no contest to spousal battery. For those who don't know, no contest means he didn't say he was guilty, but he also didn't fight the charges. It's crazy how he downplayed it years later. In an interview, he just brushed it off, saying it wasn't a big deal.
That's seriously messed up, especially with all the evidence showing a pattern of abuse. Makes you think, what if things had gone differently, if that incident had been taken more seriously?
That's a good question, and something people still think about. It brings up some really important questions about how domestic violence cases were handled, especially when famous people were involved. But of course, in June 1994, everything took a horrifying turn with the murders of Nicole and Ron Goldman.
And suddenly, this sports hero everyone loved is at the center of a double homicide investigation. The media went crazy. It was unlike anything we'd ever seen. Maybe even since then, too. Do you remember where you were when that white Bronco chase happened live on TV?
I was glued to the screen, like everyone else, it felt like. It was surreal. Watching it all happen in real time, it felt like the whole country was caught up in this drama.
It was definitely a spectacle. But underneath all the headlines was this awful reality. 2 lives cut short. Our sources describe a crime scene that was just brutal. It's hard to even imagine.
And as the trial got going, the O.J. Simpson case became about so much more than just a double homicide. It became this lightning rod for all these big discussions about race, police brutality, about the very core of the American justice system.
This is where the trial of the century really kicks off, right? The nation's hooked. Everything set for this legal battle, one that would end up showing just how divided American society really was.
Exactly. In part 2, we'll dig into that legal battle, who the key players were, what strategies they used, and how the trial became this national obsession, one that still shapes how we talk about race and justice in America, even today. Picking up where we left off, the O.J. Simpson trial, man, it was a phenomenon, a real-life drama unfolding right there on our TVs.
And the stakes were so high, 2 families dealing with this horrible loss, and the whole nation waiting for answers.
The trial brought in some of the sharpest legal minds in the country,
Oh, yeah.
The prosecution, led by Marcia Clark and Chris Darden, they went head-to-head with O.J.'s dream team of defense attorneys. Guys like Johnny Cochran, Robert Kardashian, F. Lee Bailey, the whole crew.
It felt like David versus Goliath, right? The defense team had so much money, so many resources.
And the prosecution, they had what seemed like a mountain of evidence against O.J. His blood at the crime scene, the bloody glove found at his place, plus the history of domestic abuse.
It seemed like it'd be an open and shut case.
But Johnny Cochran, he was a master, and the defense had a different plan. They shifted the focus away from the evidence and honed in on race. They knew the trial was in LA, just a few years after the Rodney King beating and the riots. The city was deeply divided.
So they were playing on the jury's emotions, on those raw wounds from the riots.
Exactly, tapping into that deep distrust of the LAPD, especially in the black community. They painted OJ as a victim of a racist police force. A black man targeted because he was famous and with a white woman.
And this is where Detective Mark Furman comes in, right?
Mm-hmm.
He found the bloody glove at OJ's place.
Yeah, Furman had a history of racist comments, and the defense used that to discredit him, to cast doubt on the whole LAPD investigation. Their argument was that Furman could have planted the glove to frame OJ.
Wow, that's a bold move. Is that a normal thing to do in court?
It's definitely risky, but it shows the power of perception in a trial. The defense knew that if they could create enough doubt for the jurors, even if it wasn't directly related to the evidence, they had a shot at getting OJ acquitted.
And they went all out to control the story, didn't they? Our sources mention they even redecorated OJ's Rockingham estate before the jury visited, replacing photos of his white friends with pictures of black celebrities and family.
Yeah, a calculated move to show a certain image of OJ to the jury. They wanted to portray him as connected to his black heritage, someone the mostly black jury could relate to.
It's crazy how much work went into shaping how the jury saw OJ. And then there's that whole glove demonstration. When OJ struggled to get his hand in that bloody glove found at the crime scene, it was like this huge turning point in the trial.
It was a powerful visual played right into the defense's hands. Johnny Cochran's line, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit," became a rallying cry for OJ's supporters.
Do you think that one moment actually swayed the jury's decision?
It's hard to say for sure, but it definitely stuck with people. That glove demonstration became the moment everyone remembers, the moment things shifted for OJ.
It became clear as the trial went on that it wasn't just about whether OJ was guilty or not. It became a symbol of all the racial tension and division in American society.
The trial brought to light the cracks in our justice system, the racial disparities and the lack of trust between the police and communities of color.
You could feel that tension in the reactions to the not guilty verdict, which, by the way, came after less than 4 hours of the jury talking it over.
Yeah, the verdict shocked a lot of white Americans. They were outraged. But a lot of black people saw it as a victory, like finally the system was working for them against a system that had always been against them.
It just showed how divided the country was on this case.
The O J Simpson trial forced America to face some hard truths about race, about justice, about the influence of celebrity. It started a national conversation that's still going on today.
Yeah, and as we look at what happened after the trial, OJ's life after the verdict, we'll see how these themes kept coming up. Stick with us for part 3, where we'll dig into the civil trial, OJ's controversial book, and his later run-ins with the law. So we've covered the trial, the verdict, the media frenzy surrounding O.J. Simpson. But the story, well, it didn't end there, did it?
No, not at all. The O J Simpson story went on long after the cameras left the courtroom. It's a story with legal battles, personal struggles, trying to make sense of such a complex and controversial legacy.
Yeah, and one of the things that really stands out is how differently people reacted to that not guilty verdict.
Oh, absolutely. For a lot of white Americans, it felt like OJ had gotten away with murder because he had a high-powered legal team and a jury influenced by racial bias.
Right. But for many black Americans, it meant something totally different.
For them, it was a symbolic victory, like pushing back against a system that had always targeted and oppressed them.
Exactly. It was like finally a win.
You have to understand that perspective. For many in the black community, OJ's acquittal felt like a rare moment of justice. It was a feeling of relief, even if it wasn't about OJ actually being innocent. It was more about a system that had rarely given black people a fair shake.
So the verdict became about something bigger than OJ himself.
Exactly. It became a symbol of the racial tensions and inequalities in America.
A symbol that those divisions, those different ideas about justice, were real and here to stay.
It really highlighted the two different Americas. One where a black man could be found not guilty of murder despite all the evidence, and another where that same verdict was seen as a complete failure of justice.
And those divisions, those different ways of seeing things, they played out in the civil trial too, where OJ was found liable for the deaths of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman.
The civil trial had different rules. It was easier to prove responsibility, and the jury decided OJ was responsible, and they ordered him to pay the families $33 million.
which he never fully paid, right?
No, and that just fueled the anger of those who felt he'd escaped true accountability.
Then there was that whole thing with the If I Did It book, OJ's hypothetical take on the murders, which was supposed to be published, but then got pulled because people were so outraged.
That was a really strange and controversial time. It felt like he was trying to make money off the murders, even if it was just a what-if story.
Yeah, it didn't go over well.
The Goldman family ended up getting the rights to the book and published it with their own comments, setting the record straight and refuting OJ's version of events.
It felt like OJ was always trying to control the story, to shape how people saw him. But then in 2007, he's back in court again, this time for armed robbery in Las Vegas.
Yeah, that Las Vegas thing, it was almost like a bad dream. OJ back in court, facing charges that could put him back in prison.
It was so weird, this ex-football star reduced to stealing sports memorabilia. What do you think is going on with him then?
It's tough to say what was going through his head in Las Vegas, but it reinforced this idea that he was a troubled guy, unable to move on from his past. Even though he was found not guilty in the murder trial, there was this feeling that his own bad choices ultimately caught up with him.
So what does it all mean? Why are we still talking about O.J. Simpson all these years later? What is it about this case that keeps us fascinated and frustrated?
The O J Simpson case, it wasn't just a trial. It was like this massive cultural earthquake. It revealed all these cracks in our justice system, in the media, in our society as a whole. It forced us to face some really hard truths about race, class, and celebrity. And those conversations, those divisions, they're still happening today.
Yeah, it's a case that makes us think about our own biases, our own ideas about justice.
Yeah.
It shows us that the search for truth is often messy and confusing, and that even with tons of evidence, doubt can still exist, and people can see things completely differently.
I think the most important thing is that the O J Simpson saga reminds us that the fight for real equality and justice is a long and tough one. It takes constant effort, honesty with ourselves, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the systems we live in.
So looking back at this complicated and often troubling case, we're left with more questions than answers. It's a story that still resonates today, a reminder that the past never really goes away, and that the O.J. Simpson trial is still shaping how we talk about race, justice, and accountability in America today.